for singing the scripture this morning. Didn't know it was all there, did you? When I was growing up, we used to sit by the Christmas tree. I decided not to do that this morning. And read the Christmas story. And I thought about doing that this morning, but then I got to thinking about what was left out of the Christmas story, maybe. And so I wrote my own. So this morning, instead of preaching, I invite you to do something that I did when I was a kid, and people thought I never paid attention. It's because I'm a visual person. I close my eyes, and when it's read to me, I see it. I see Bethlehem. I see the manger. I see the shepherds. I see it all. I hear it. I hear the donkey braying. I hear the sheep baaing. I smell it. Yeah, even, some of those smells, not too sure you want to think you're smelling, but it's there. So this morning, however you want to hear this story, I invite you to be there. Naomi stood at the entrance to the weaver's home. With one arm, she held a new bundle of cloth, and with the other, she shaded her eyes against the brilliance of the setting sun. Even now, the sky was turning from vibrant oranges into gold, into peach, into a deep mauve. Light would not last long after the sunset, and she should be moving along home. Bethlehem had become quite a busy and crowded place with many, many strangers since they announced the census was taking place. She shouldn't be out alone, but her mother needed more cloth. Behind her, the evening star was beginning to glow. She turned to go when a hand grasped her arm. She nearly dropped her bundle. Naomi pulled back as she turned to see an old, wizened face. "You the midwife's child?" asked a creaking gate of a voice. Child, thought Naomi. She hadn't been called a child for 2 years. But she nodded and again tried to pull away from the bony hand, but the grasp was surprisingly firm. "Run and fetch her. Tell her she's needed." Again, Naomi nodded and tried to pull away. This time, the hand pinched harder. "There," the old crone said, pointing to the house across the street. Naomi looked up at the house and started to say she would get her mother when the old woman continued, "Not the house, through there." Again, she pointed across the street, but this time at an opening in the wall beside the house. "Through there, to the stable around the back." This time Naomi gasped, and the old woman pushed her away. "Hurry!" Naomi ran down the street, weaving between people and animals and bundles that seemed to be piled everywhere. She slipped into a narrower but less crowded side passage, and then into a walkway that went past the room where she and her mother lived. Breathless when she arrived, she ran in, gasping, "Mama!" The lantern was lit at one end of the room, and she saw her mother putting herbs and oils into her satchel. "Mama," she gasped as Sarah looked up, "you're needed." Naomi put down her bundle and continued, "The old woman across from the weavers asked for you, only—" Naomi hesitated. "Only she said you're not at the house, but down around back in the stable." Sarah laughed. "Does she want me to deliver a lamb?" Naomi shrugged. "I don't know, but she seemed urgent and said for you to hurry." "Then let's be going," said Sarah as she hefted her satchel over her shoulder. "Bring the birthing stool and a lantern," she added as she picked up her own lantern and went outside. Naomi trimmed her lantern, picked up the stool, and hurried to catch up. They retraced Naomi's steps back to the house, now in the dark. The stars were glowing almost brightly enough to not need the lanterns, but the little narrow passage back to the stable was dark. Outside the stable entrance stood a man tending a small fire. He looked up as the two women He looked at the two women and stepped aside. Inside, they found the old crone with a young girl that looked only a few years older than Naomi. Naomi looked back and saw that the man had followed them in. The old woman looked at Sarah and said, "That's Joseph," and then pointed to the very pregnant young woman propped up in the hay and added, "She's Mary." Sarah's eyes widened and she started to say something, but the old woman cut her off. "There's no room up there," pointing at where the house was, "and there's more privacy out here where tongues don't wag." With that, she abruptly left. Sarah, taking charge, looked at the man Joseph and said, "Why don't you wait outside and tend that fire?" With a grateful look, he nodded and turned to leave. Then Sarah looked at Mary. "My name is Sarah, and this is my daughter Naomi, and we are here to help bring your new baby into this world." The frightened look on Mary's face lessened a little as Sarah set her satchel down and began to arrange things. Later, in the watch of the night, a new baby was born to this young woman, Mary. Sarah cleaned him as Naomi went out to burn the used hay and the little fire that Joseph still tended. When she went back in, Mary was holding her son, and Sarah was rummaging through her satchel. She looked at Naomi and asked, "Where's the cloth you brought home? I need to show Mary how to wrap her baby." Naomi stopped in her tracks and pictured herself running into their home and putting the cloth down. "It's still at home," she said. "I'll run and get it." She rushed outside past Joseph, who saw her look and asked, "What's wrong? What's happened?" Panic was loud in his voice. "Oh," said Naomi, "I forgot the cloth to wrap the baby. I've got to run home and get some." The baby is fine," she reassured him. "Cloth?" he said, "to wrap the baby?" He reached inside his cloak and unwound a length of binding cloth. "Will this do?" Naomi gasped. She knew travelers wound themselves with binding cloth when they would travel for more than a day, because if they died, they needed to be prepared for burial. But she had never actually seen it on a man. This cloth, however, was essentially the same. She looked up to see her mother standing there. Sarah said, "That will do fine. We need about this much." She spread out her arms and indicated a length. Joseph turned from them, and Sarah motioned for Naomi to go back inside. She heard a cutting sound, and when she looked back, Joseph was giving her mother the cloth. As the baby lay on Mary's lap, Sarah showed her how the wrapping was supposed to be done with swaddling cloth. Then Sarah called Joseph back in. "Mary is tired. She needs to rest. I've put hay in the manger and laid your son there while she sleeps. The manger will cradle him, and you can rest as well." Sarah looked over at Naomi. "You stay here a few more hours in case they need something else." And then Sarah went home. Naomi burrowed down into her own pile of hay and sat watching the scene. How peaceful, she thought, even if it was out in a stable. It was quiet, with just the muted sounds of the bustle outside, the rustling of sleeping animals inside, and then she too drifted off to sleep. She woke with a start and looked to see Mary holding her son with a kind of wonder on her face. As Naomi stirred, Mary looked over at her. "Why don't you go on home?" she said. "You're tired, and if we really need you, someone from the house can fetch you or your mother, but we're fine." She looked down at her son and smiled. Naomi yawned and stretched and got up. Giving the baby one last caress, she picked up her lantern and the birthing stool and slipped from the stable into the cool night. As she turned from the wall entrance toward home, she heard a commotion. As she got closer, she smelled sheep and saw there were shepherds blocking the way. One of them saw her stool and hurried over to her. "Are you the midwife?" "My mother is," said Naomi, thinking of her mother's laugh about birthing a lamb instead of a baby. "We're looking for a baby that's wrapped in swaddling cloth and has a manger for a cradle. We've got to find the baby. Do you know if one has been born tonight? Did your mother help? Have you seen him?" All of this rushed out at Naomi, and she took a step back. "Well, yes," she said. Suddenly the shepherds crowded around her again. "Where? Take us," one cried. Naomi stepped back again.